Hey, power people. Welcome to Renewable Rides. I'm Gareth Evans.
And I'm Dan Roberts. We're the founding team of VECKTA, a platform and marketplace streamlining how companies buy on-site energy.
In each episode, we'll uncover the latest trends, challenges, and triumphs relating to the energy transition through the experiences of our team and our inspiring guests.
Our goal is to help companies take action to create a resilient, profitable, sustainable, and thriving energy future.
Let's go.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to another Renewable Rides podcast. And today we're diving into a super crucial topic for us as business leaders wanting to harness the power of these on-site energy systems that we've been talking about for many episodes now. But now that we've designed these systems, how do we actually effectively buy them from developers and contractors in the market? So we'll cover several important topics. How do we get multiple quotes? How do we get apples to apples quotes? How do we manage our risks? How do we ensure that we're getting a really competitive deal? And most of all, how do we get a solution that matches our criteria for success and delivers value into the long term? But before we get into that, Dan, how are you doing? What's new?
Doing very well, Gareth. It's been a fun couple days. My younger cousin and his wife have been visiting the last couple days. They live in Northern Virginia, so I don't get to see them too often, but it's been fun forging a much deeper relationship in adulthood than we ever did as kids, just by the nature of us living on opposite sides of the country. So fun for him and his wife to come and visit, spend time with the kids. My kids were absolutely just distraught this morning when they had to leave because they're heading off to a wedding for the weekend here in Southern California. But yeah, it's really good to spend time with family. How about yourself?
Love that. I'm ditching my family again. So the opposite to you, it's the last practice hike before Mount Whitney in a few weeks. So we're gonna hike with a neighbor up San Gorgonio Mountain tomorrow. But we're gonna start it tonight. So we're gonna drive up to North LA, get the bite to eat, head a few miles up the trail, spend the night camping, get a bit of altitude exposure, and then finish the hike tomorrow. So super stoked on that. I'll have lots of thinking time. I'll record some vlogs and excited to share the experience on the next podcast.
Good. Well, as we were just discussing, that's a fun one. I've done Gorgonio, and it is a good prep for Whitney as well. So I think you'll be pleased that you did it when you're standing at Whitney Portal getting ready to head up.
Nice.
So well, before we get into the real meat and details of this particular podcast, let's just do a quick refresh on all the great groundwork that we've done and covered in the previous episodes. So really, we've already gone through that. We've analyzed our full portfolio of facilities. We've assessed where amongst our portfolio we can get the greatest returns on investment. We've designed an on-site energy deployment strategy. And at the high value sites, we've configured systems to meet our specific business objectives and looked at local constraints and current energy consumption at those facilities, the market conditions and the financial incentives that are impacting those facilities. It seems like once we've done that, we've gathered the right stakeholders and feel really comfortable with the solutions, assuming that we can get that across cost and resilience and emissions. And really, we've got all the necessary folks internally to sign off on the project, and now everybody's rallied around finding the right partner to build and potentially finance and operate that system. So, congratulations, we've made a ton of progress to date. But really now what we need to do is where the rubber meets the road. We need to find a partner to create this profitable and sustainable business opportunity. So how do we buy systems that is something that we can get everybody to sign off on? We want to find the right developer, the right partner. This is a long-term commitment. So what do we need to do, Gareth?
Yeah, I think as we've touched on the last few episodes, Dan, these systems are super high value, can have massive and positive impacts on our business, but they can be complex in these kind of planning and procurement phases. We've got different components to think about, different technologies, different financial options. And it's really crucial for us to understand, in the market, who should we be buying from and how do we actually get apples to apples quotes back because of all these different variables, it's very easy for us to receive completely different bids, which make it really impossible for us to assess, compare, contrast, and then make a really confident award. Different providers have different metrics by which they operate. They have different levels of service. They have different ways of managing contract terms and pricing things. And I think one of the biggest risks we often see in the market, Dan, is that, a lot of our customers have made the mistake in the past of either being sold to by a supplier that they felt like they could trust and maybe felt like they were offering them the right solution, only for them to then be out of business a few years later, or get stuck at an interconnection permit because they've never done it before, crazy things like that. So we need to make sure that we're going to market and sourcing the right suppliers. And then we also don't want to rely on, I've worked with this supplier in my past, maybe they can, figure this out and do it for me just because I've already pre-qualified them. Taking shortcuts can lead to big consequences downstream. So to drive the best outcomes, we want to run a competitive process, and we want to do that with a short list of really highly qualified developers and contractors that meet our needs. And so to really do that, and to drive this apples to apples opportunity, we need to develop a request for proposal. This shouldn't be unusual for most of our business leaders and companies out there. We run RFPs all day long for many procurement processes, but we need to make sure that we're asking the right questions of the right suppliers in the right language with the right level of detail, such that we get really good quality bids back that we can review. And ultimately, this is about formulating our ask and defining exactly what it is that we want. So instead of being passively sold something, we've gone through this process of determining what system we want. So let's tell the market, what is our project background? Where is our facility? What do we want the energy system to perform and do? What is our key priority? What are the specifications of the system? So we spend all this time and effort actually designing the system. So let's tell the market exactly what we expect, the values we expect to receive back in return from those technologies. And then, is our facility new build, which is a very different approach to retrofitting an existing building? And then we need to define a bunch of assumptions. And Dan, do you want to talk us through some of those assumptions?
Certainly. This is a really critical aspect. I mean, we've seen it where customers have gone through this previously, and they don't define those on the front end, and they essentially leave the suppliers up to use their own assumptions, and when they're not the same, it's very difficult to compare. So first and foremost, what are the financial assumptions that you're going to expect the suppliers to use when they're crafting their proposals and doing all of their calculations on what the long-term savings and benefits? So things like, what are the tariff that they should be using and the structure of that tariff? Because that has a huge impact on the business case or the savings calculations that go into it. What is the assumed utility rate escalation? We typically see, certainly here in California, 3% is very conservative. We've been seeing upwards of 10 or higher than 10% on an annual basis of late. But I think 3, 4, 5% is typically standard, but you want to make sure they're all using the same. What's the corporate discount rate for my company, and what's the interest rate on debt that we want companies to be using? Is there a hurdle rate or threshold that we need to have met, whether it's internal rate of return or whether it's payback period or some other metric that needs to be met in order for our capital allocation committee to sign off on this project? And if we know that, let's communicate that to the market, because we can, one, ensure that we end up getting bids back that meet that, and two, suppliers that don't feel like they can meet that don't need to waste their time.
Yeah.
Moving from financial, then it comes into operational. Is there any expected load changes? So whether that's growth, we're expanding, we're adding new production lines, we're growing the facility, or it's reduction, we're implementing some energy efficiency measures, and so maybe our load to be served is coming down. Is there any critical load? In the case of outages that require backup, we're working with a biotech company right now that processes human tissue samples, and that is that they cannot have that machine go down because they'll lose those samples, and this is cancer identification. So really critical loads that need to be served by a backup system. And then what are the cost of outages per hour that the company should assume if resilience is one of our key factors? And then lastly, on the sustainability or emission side, what is the baseline carbon emissions that we're using to calculate it? Is it kind of broad e-grid? Is it some other calculation that we're using at this facility to determine what our current emissions are and what our savings would be from this system? And do we have an internal cost of carbon? I was really pleased to be talking with a very large grocery store chain recently, and they recently implemented an internal cost of carbon of $185 per metric ton, and that really helps impact their business case. But it's important to communicate that to the supplier so they can help with their calculations. Beyond that, Gareth, what else do we need to be thinking about?
Yeah, I love that, Dan. I particularly like the cost of outages and the cost of carbon because I think many businesses overlook that. And I think being able to include that into the assessment and the feasibility of these projects, it already very attractive projects look amazingly powerful and strong once you start including assumptions like that. So now that we've set that context and we've told the suppliers exactly what we assume as a business and where we want the project to be operating, now we need to determine how do we actually want to finance the system. So we should have done this through engaging the right stakeholders early in our process. But if we want to self-finance the system versus someone else financing it, it's obviously a very different group of suppliers and developers that we want to go to. And so if it's energy as a service where we want someone to come in and finance this system, own it, operate it, and we just reap the benefits through exchanging our existing utility bill for another one, we need to also understand how long do we want to lock that deal in for? What are the end of contract mechanisms? Do we have the ability to buy it out? Does the company come in and take the equipment away? What is that exchange process? Can we end the contract early? And so we want to make sure that we're clearly articulating that financial expectation. And we also want to then determine with our suppliers what it is that we'll be responsible for as the customer and what we expect them to be responsible for. I think if we don't do this early, then this is when we get stung with change orders. So we don't want to assume that the developer is pricing everything in and they know exactly what we expect. So things like structural assessments of roofs for solar, interconnection agreements, permits, approvals. We want to make sure that in our RFP, we state clearly whether the supplier is responsible or whether we're going to take something on. Maybe we've got an architect on staff that is going to edit some drawings versus the supplier needing to do it. So let's make sure we clearly articulate the roles and responsibilities. We want to make sure we determine any particular contractual or performance guarantee requirements. So who is responsible for the equipment performance? If we're self-financing it, someone isn't necessarily operating, maintaining, and responsible for that. So we need to make sure that we've negotiated that in, that someone's going to represent those interests, or we make it clear that we're going to take on that responsibility. Same for degradation of equipment and performance guarantees. If it's energy as a service, the developer is responsible for all of that. So we want to make sure that it's very clear that they know it, we know it, and that it's being priced in accordingly. Are there any schedule commitments? Do you have to have this system online by a particular date? And if, for instance, if that date isn't met by the supplier, do you want to associate any penalties with that? So making sure that everyone can price in that risk and opportunity. And then lastly, I'd say, do we have any specific and unique needs? Dan, you've been working with a company recently where union labor was actually really important to them as a business. That wasn't necessarily specified early in the process, and we've kind of caught it later in the game. But moving forward with a lot of our customers, it's being very clear around, do you have these requirements? Because it is truly going to impact who we go to in the market and how you maximize incentives and tax credits to maybe qualify for different labor laws and needs.
Absolutely. So now that we've crafted the ask to the market and we've clearly articulated what our expectations are, what we need in order to proceed forward, which is a huge benefit. I mean, the developers and contractors in the market absolutely love this because they know that you're a serious buyer when you're articulating it in this manner. And it also helps shorten their time to putting together a proposal because they know, okay, we've got to do these things and we know that it's going to meet their requirements, assuming that we articulate these. The next thing we need, and again, this kind of comes in as part of the process of engaging all the internal stakeholders, is determining what does success look like and how will these bids be evaluated.
Yeah.
Critical to communicate that to the developers and contractors in the market. So these are things like pricing, schedule, who's the team that's going to be working on this, and what are their experience? Do they have experience working with similar type of systems to ours, similar facilities to ours, and similar system sizes to ours? What are the terms that we want to be seen, and do we have anything that we need them to agree to on the front end when they're submitting their proposal? And what is their project approach? These are all critical things, and not just thinking through, okay, what are the key buckets that we're gonna evaluate, but also how much weight are we gonna give to each of those, and what is of most important to us? Because it helps the developers and contractors in the market focus on those areas. The thing I would expand upon then is ensuring that when the bids come back, that they cover all of those areas.
Yeah.
And we can get into that in more detail on how we help buyers communicate that, and then suppliers get that back in their proposals. So I think really importantly, the best suppliers are extremely busy. In some cases, they have project pipeline backlogs that are measured in years, and yet at the same time, those are the best suppliers. You want to go get their attention. And so if they know that you're a serious buyer, you set clear expectations for what you want, you can then get their attention, and they're not just going to throw a bid out there to suffice the ask, but they're actually going to put time into it, and really want to spend time winning your business. So now that we know what we want, we can shortlist, pre-qualify suppliers that match our specific needs based on location, system type, finance or commercial model, experience, financial ratings, all of those, to then go get them to be competing for our business. Gareth?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Not all developers and contractors are born equal. And I think it's really important to understand that. And, they all have their own strengths and weaknesses. And while they don't necessarily publicly announce that, it's really important to understand which suppliers and developers excel in which areas of the industry, such that you can work with those that really match your areas of need. And so, the way we think about qualifying suppliers is based on commercial model. Some suppliers are awesome at energy as a service contracts. Others do not offer that. Those that do, they may have very specific requirements around you as the off taker. Are you bankable? Are you a certain investment grade? And if you don't meet that criteria, you're not going to be a fit. And so you don't want to waste each other's time and energy going through this process. While others have a lot more flexibility, they have different lines of financing. They can support you with debt, lease structures, or even PPAs, even if maybe you don't have the best credit rating. So it's really important to understand which suppliers match your financial needs. Then project size. We know some developers really excel in projects, say, below a megawatt, where others won't touch a project that's smaller than 3.5 or 5 megawatts. So you need to make sure that you've got the right supplier for the right size of system. For many of the big suppliers in the market, the small projects just aren't economical because they've got such big overheads that they won't even touch a sub-megawatt project. So let's make sure that we're not going to, say, a Schneider or a Siemens if we're a small brewery that's got a 0.5 megawatt system, because it's just not going to be a fit. We're going to work with the local solar and storage developer who's knocking out small projects with a consistent crew time and time again. So once we've specified the project size, the next thing is location. And this can be really complex because there are amazing developers and contractors at both a international level, national level, right down to our local suppliers. But the key to remember is, a lot of the international, national players, they may be household names. They may excel in big utility scale projects or mega on-site energy projects. A lot of what we see in the market is that 1 to 10 megawatt range. And in that range, some of the best suppliers are regional and local developers. I came out of one of the biggest international developers in the world, and the thought of us doing a local project for a brewery or a biotech or a winery or a local manufacturer was unheard of. It had to be a mega mine site or oil and gas facility. And so the key is understanding for our particular location, who are the best suppliers for us that match the project size, the project specs, and that we're really prioritizing and going to market for those suppliers, especially if we've got a portfolio across a region or across a country or internationally. We might have to contract with different suppliers who excel in their own local areas. And we often see these projects are most successful when we use those regional and local players because they know the rules, they know the regulations, they know the stakeholders, they know where to get the best talent and labor. And so that's why we exist, is to really help our customers find the best suppliers for their needs. So Dan, you've got some great examples of where this has been done well and where maybe it hasn't. Please share.
Yeah, the first I'd highlight is a steel coating plant, or part of the steel supply chain. And I think the interesting thing here, and it comes back to ensuring that you're going to the right suppliers or right developers and contractors in the market. In this particular example, they had some prior experience. They had three companies in mind that they wanted to reach out to and engage for this new project that they were pursuing. And it turns out that those three, and they're very well-known names, very, very prominent and very reputable developers on the market. But the problem for this particular facility was that one of those had moved upstream or to larger projects. So they now no longer do sub 5 megawatt projects. This was roughly a 1 megawatt with about a 1.5 megawatt hour battery energy storage system. So that was kind of out of the question. They're no longer playing the smaller projects. And two, only offer PPAs anymore. So they only offer energy as a service where they own, operate, and maintain. And this particular company was looking to self-finance the system. So if they had exclusively gone to those three known entities and solicited them, they would have been turned down 3 out of 3. And they may have thought that this was a bad project and probably not worth pursuing because of them getting turned down by 3 reputable companies that they knew. Turns out the project is amazing. They ran a competitive process. They got some great bids, and they've now have selected the one that they want to proceed forward with, and they're going to reap the long-term benefits of this. Another great example is, again, understanding who the players are in the market. And it's not always just the big names that are who you should go with. There's regional players, as you said, that bring tremendous value. And with a cold storage customer, it was really interesting. They had experience with one project, and when they went to go get bids on the next project, turns out that the EPC firm, the constructor that was subbed by the developer on the first project, rather than going straight to the developer, they now just engaged the EPC directly, and they were able to cut out essentially a portion of margin that was built into the previous project by going directly to the EPC. So I think it's really important to understand who the strengths are, who the players are, and it's very difficult to maintain the network and understand who all these folks are in the market if that's not your core business. That is something that we certainly help clients with, is understanding who they should be engaging with. And part of that is ensuring that you're driving competition. So it's not just getting the right players at the table, but also getting multiple of them so that you drive competition. By setting a level playing field in the ask to the market, you're going to maximize the value by creating transparency, structured and engaging the competitive process. And we see that competition is crucial, not just for driving down cost. It's not a race to the bottom. We've never seen a client go with the lowest bid, but it's also important for getting better terms and getting a sense of what's reasonable. Where should we be playing, and where should we be expecting to pay in the market by getting multiple bids? So now let's assume we've got multiple bids from great suppliers. What do we do next?
Yeah, this is the exciting part. This is when the rubber starts hitting the road. So we've got these bids that have come in, but now we need to evaluate them and make a really confident and informed decision. And we need to do that with the backing of all our key stakeholders. And so to ensure that we can do that, we need to make sure that, first of all, the bids that have come back match that evaluation and success criteria that we framed and Dan discussed in the RFP development phase. So let's ensure that the bids come in, meet our minimum specifications and the criteria for success that we determined. We then want to make sure that we rank each of the bids against each other, against those key success metrics. And then using those kind of weighted scores, we can now shortlist our top 2 or 3 developers to negotiate with. And at this stage, now it's important to meet people either in person or at minimum through video conference. We want to look them in the eye. We want to make sure that we really truly understand their approach, their team, their philosophy, their contract terms, and their execution strategy. And we want to make sure that we then negotiate around key points that are critical to us. A real important piece of this is making sure that we're thinking about the long-term benefits. And it's very often that we see the lowest price developer winning in this industry, because very often our customers are smart enough to know that these are long-term investments, and saving a little bit of money now can actually penalize you later. And a great example is when negotiating an energy as a service or a power purchase agreement contract is, do you want a zero escalator? So do you want to lock in an energy rate for 20 years, in which case you're going to pay a little bit more now and forever over the life of the project? Or do you want to pay less now and you squeeze one end of a balloon, but over the life of the contract, you're going to pay maybe a couple of percent escalation year on year? So really understanding the mechanisms behind that. And financially, do you want to save money now, pay for it later? Or do you want to make sure that you've got a term that you can lock in and really plan and mitigate your business around? If necessary, we need to make sure that we consult with experts to make sure we're making a really informed decision. We want to really scrutinize the contract terms. We typically don't advise that customers get into the nitty-gritty of the legal aspect of projects until we've shortlisted and selected the winning supplier, because legal can be expensive. And so we want to make sure that we're only negotiating with the final and top priority, but reserving the right to move to our second or third choices if we can't align with that preferred supplier on terms. Then we want to make sure we do a final check before signing off and making sure that we're looking out for any key contract clauses that could really hurt us in terms of our investment in the long term. Dan, that's a huge amount of info. I think the key to this is we need to be doing this not just on single projects, but repeatedly and at scale. We are true believers that a way to do that is through a marketplace. What are the benefits of a marketplace platform?
Certainly. And as you said, that's a lot to take on. And we've kind of framed that around a single site. Imagine trying to run this in parallel for 4, 10, 20 sites at the same time. It's a lot to wrangle. And so I think first and foremost, when is a marketplace appropriate? When is a marketplace platform appropriate? And I think the marketplaces are most beneficial in extremely fragmented markets. And the best example that I've come across, I've mentioned this to folks in the industry that I've met with previously, is the juxtaposition of when a marketplace is appropriate and when it's not, is in the airline industry. And so I'll unpack that a little bit. In the airline industry, if I'm Delta, United, American, Southwest, any of the airlines, and I'm looking to purchase an aircraft, an airplane, that's not a fragmented market. That's an extremely concentrated market. There's really just two options for me. I either buy it from Boeing or I buy it from Airbus. And so there's not a marketplace platform for airlines to purchase aircraft because they just go to one of those two companies. However, us as travelers, whether it's for business or pleasure, have dozens or hundreds of options for airline tickets that we can purchase. And so there are many marketplaces across Expedia, Booking, Kayak that we can go to purchase these airline tickets because it's extremely fragmented. And if we kind of liken that to buying a commercial industrial on-site energy system, we're not just looking at buying the airline ticket, but we're also looking at the hotel and the rental car and the insurance and all the aspects that we need for a successful trip, or in our case, for a successful energy project. And so that's really where marketplaces come in, and our market is extremely fragmented. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of suppliers that you could go to. And so how do you make sense of all that? A marketplace can make that really efficient. Other benefits include transparency. So oftentimes marketplaces can help standardize expectations and evaluation criteria to developers and contractors. Makes it easier to compare the different offerings, apples to apples, as we've talked about in this episode. And you can also centralize things like supplier or developer contractor Q&A so that everybody's operating off of the same set of information. Make it easy for your own internal teams that are key to the decision-making process to collaborate. A couple other aspects: efficiency. It centralizes everything for collaboration across all parties, and risk management. Marketplaces offer insights to help you gauge really the reliability of different developers and contractors in the market, as well as benchmarking against them. And it can be invaluable in just managing the risks associated with this long-term, as we'll call it, one-way door investment. So I think it's critical, especially for companies that have large portfolios of facilities, to leverage technology and leverage a program-based approach to maximizing and getting the most out of this opportunity.
Love it. So there we have it. A very comprehensive guide to taking our desired energy system to market and making sure that we get competitive quotes and the best return on investment for our business. I think the real key takeaway points are: don't be sold a solution. Don't rely on a single developer or contractor to represent your best interests. We need to determine what we want. We need to articulate that to the market in a really simple, understandable way. We need to articulate our criteria for success. And then we need to thoroughly evaluate the options that ultimately determine how we will make our decision that aligns with our business success and strategy. And when we do all these things right and we select the best possible partner who's going to deliver incredible energy outcomes for us for the long term, we will realize profitable and sustainable outcomes. And particularly in this inflationary economy, which isn't going away anytime soon, it's essential that we're truly reevaluating how we operate our businesses, mitigating these escalating energy risks and power outages, and then really optimizing our returns on investment. And so let's make sure for every dollar we spend, we're getting multiple returns on that over the life of these systems. And when done right, we'll deliver extremely powerful outcomes for our business and allow us to take control of our energy and being active consumers versus passive consumers. So there we have it. It's been an awesome episode. We'd love you to subscribe, share this with your friends, and also provide feedback on any other questions that you have on topics like this. Even today we talked about EPCs, developers, equipment suppliers. They're all terminologies for different types of suppliers in this market. We'll unpack that in a future episode. But if you've got any questions about this, please hit us up and keep driving towards these profitable and sustainable outcomes.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers, Dan. Good episode. See you soon.
See ya.
We receive a lot of questions from business leaders around the world wanting to learn more about the energy transition, what is possible, and where to start. So to help you stay informed and up to date on best practices, opportunities, risks, and success stories, we created an industry newsfeed at VECKTA.com/news with all our podcasts, blogs, and newsletter. Check it out and connect with Dan, myself, and the VECKTA team to learn more. Cheers and have a good one.